Hello fellow special magicians, we're going to be talking about the Legend Anthology Academy variant of the Endymion. Now what does that mean? What does it do? So your main win condition is going to be Endymion. And this is because he can summon himself constantly and then retrieve a spell from the graveyard. That is going to be pretty much the main win con. The secondary win cons is going to be Arcanine Magician for turn 2. Fortunately every for long play, and then Zaro for the beatdown. The tertiary win con is going to be Master Chaos, which is also really good. So let's continue. So Dark Magician. So the reason you have this card is for Dark Magicians specifically. Master Chaos has been added later, but you have it mostly for the Dark Magician's fusion monster. And that's also the reason why you have Dark Magician Girl. Because you have Dark Magician Girl and Dark Magician just so that this can float properly. And the reason you summon this is because its effect to draw a card. Now it does have other effects, such as when you draw that card, if it's a spell or trap, you can set it. If it's a trap or quick play, you can activate it that turn. So let's say that you were to draw Fate, you can draw it and then set it, and then if you do set it, it can also be used that turn. So that's actually pretty good. But you're mostly using it for the draw, because in this event, draw power is a lot more limited since things like Upstart, Chicken Games ban, as well as things like Toon Tables. So that is why this guy's here. Now there is Souls. Souls is here to dump any second copies of spellbooks, because all the spellbooks have a Heart of Once per turn. So if you were to draw into multiple, this will allow you to dump some of them to get some draws. Next is that its mill effect. So its mill effect is pretty good because you can mill pretty much anything. Any of the high levels, because you could mill Dark Magician Girl, Endymion, or even Chaos himself. Now you will only really mill Illusion of Chaos if you are attempting to summon Master of Chaos, and you happen to also have Magicalized Fusion, and you also happen to have either King of the Swamp or Dark Magician already in the graveyard, right? Or on the field, I should say. But mostly you're milling either Endymion, Dark Magician, or Dark Magician Girl. As for its other effects now, so you could either summon it or summon the Dark Magician. That solely depends on what's in your hand. If you need to summon Dark Magician, or if it's fine just being in the graveyard, or if you're not even doing anything with Dark Magician, and you're simply just summoning this to go into things like the Prowler, for example. Next is going to be the Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. You're using this mostly because when I was playing this deck, there has been a couple or a few times where, probably a couple, where I needed a spellcaster on my field. Because Spellbook of Fate, Spellbook of the Master, and Spellbook of Knowledge all kind of want you to have a spellcaster on the field, right? Now, Spellbook of Knowledge can take any spellbook card from your hand or field. So this actually does support this, because then because if you have Knowledge in your hand, if you don't want to get rid of a spellcaster on the field, but you also don't want to get rid of a spell card in your hand, you can instead use Secrets to get Magician and then send Magician instead from your hand. But also, if you were to grab him, so let's say that you have like Citadel and Endymon's Lab, right? And then you top deck Secrets. Well, this would allow you to get the counters needed to summon Endymion, which has happened quite a few times. So basically, I have added him so that Spellbook of Secrets has a monster that it can search, rather than just spells. Next up is King of the Swamp. This one's pretty obvious. It's there to substitute Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl, and then its extra effect to add Conversation to your deck to your hand. It's obviously a really good one, so it basically acts as like a secondary Dark Magician, while also acting as a Sage, which is pretty good. Now next, I'm going to clump these together, Auroras of Prophecy, Magical Exemplar, and Zara. So the main reason you have these cards is so that you can summon Crowley. Now the reason you want to summon Crowley is because if this card is link summoned, it can reveal 3 spellbook cards with different names from your deck, and your opponent picks one. Well, let me rephrase that. Your opponent randomly picks one for you to add to your hand, and then shuffle the rest back to your deck. Now there is this extra effect where it says each turn, you can normal summon one level 5 or higher spell cast or monster without distributing, but you really don't really care about that one. You care most about the search, and so, and this is kind of like your main starter, is Crowley. So these guys are there to go into him. Now there are other routes. So with Zara, for example, you can go into Calamity, right? You can go into Calamity, and you can either grab Alice, which would give him 1,000 attack or defense, or what I feel the better equipped is Varam, because Varam will make it so that he cannot be destroyed by your opponent's spell and traps, and when your opponent tries to battle with it at the start of the battle phase, at the start of the damage calculation, Zoro will kill it. So, with all that being said, that's also a really good in board when it comes to Zoro. When it comes to Amoris, so Amoris is actually the most versatile of these two because it can summon either or even Defender. So what you would do is, let's say that you reveal Secrets and you summon Zara himself. So now you can go into things like Arcanine Magician or Fortune Lady Every, right? Arcanine Magician is really good for turn 2. Because its pop is now once per turn, so that means that you could just pop your opponent's entire board, and pretty easily too, because you should have enough spell counters to do so. And unfortunately, Every is basically the one that you summon if you plan on playing the long game. This is also another really good turn one monster to end with, because your opponent normally can't OTK you, because in this format, OTKing is pretty hard, right? It's not super easy. So fortunately, Every is pretty good, because then she'll revive herself during your opponent's end phase, and then during your standby phase, you can then non-target banish one monster they control, which is really good. And then she also gets bigger because she also gets extra attack and defense per standby phase. So it's really good. It's basically DPE but in caster form. Now when it comes to Exemplar, and I should also note that Exemplar and Omoris are not hard once per turns, but Zoro is. So keep that in mind. Zoro is a hard once per turn, but these two are not. So what that means that you could chain it. So let's say that you have Omoris. You could reveal Secrets, summon Exemplar, right? And then let's say that there's another Amoris in your hand, right? So you can use Secrets, you can use some other spell, use her effect to summon the other Amoris, right? Now it's really good if you have all 3 of these, because then you could take this, reveal a spellbook card, summon her, use some spells, summon him, and then use his effect to summon another level 4. Really good with Foolish, for example. But anyways. So these 3 are there to kind of basically facilitate things like Calamity, Arcanine Magician, and then Every. One thing I should mention, the reason we have her, Artemis, here, is because, so since he has to equip one of these to him to get his effect, this is probably the one you will want to pick first. And this is simply because it will thin your deck, because this one says while this card is equipped to a monster, you can add 1 match-this monster from your deck to your hand, so you could add another copy of Zoro for next turn. So it's a really good follow-up move. So Zoro is a pretty strong turn 1 starter, because you can just summon it, get the Artemis, and then you summon another level 4. You go into you use Artemis to search another Zaro, and then you synchro into Calamity, and then equip with a ROM, and then pass turn. I mean, ideally you want to do more stuff, but like that by itself is really strong in this format. Now next up is going to be Defender. So Defender is here because its effect is actually pretty good. Because in a more lower powered format, this effect does give you some mileage, especially when you have cards like Dark Magicians. So you make it harder for them to destroy this card, and then when they do destroy it, you float into, like I said, 2 monsters. And then also on top of that, there are some cards like in Heroes where they get special effects when they kill stuff. So Defender will also protect you from those type of effects. Next is going to be Illusion of Chaos, the last one here. So this one is to mostly search for either Souls or Dark Magician. Now this can also be used to summon Master of Chaos, and this being in the deck is the reason this is here, because you can't summon it. And so what you could do is use this to search Souls, shuffle this back into the deck, and then use Souls to then mill Illusion of Chaos, to then get like Magic Fusion if you have it, and then fuse it into Master of Chaos somehow. But you could also keep this in your hand, which sometimes is the better alternative. It's just keep this in your hand. So like when you use it to search Souls, you just shuffle another card into the deck, but not Illusion of Chaos. And the purpose of that is because each turn you can search either Souls or Dark Magician. And being able to search Souls is really good, right? Being able to search it, like being able to search the first one, and then have a guarantee to search the second one, that's pretty good. Now off to the spells. Polymerization, pretty obvious. Monster Reborn. Alright, so Monster Reborn, I mean, it's pretty strong in a lower powered format because you can kind of steal monsters, obviously. So with Endymion the Master Magician, he can pop, right? So what you could do is summon him, retrieve Monster Reborn, discard a spell, pop a card, and then use Reborn to then get that card that you just popped. You will see this quite a bit in my video where I played it, my compilation. But this has actually come in handy quite a few times. So, Foolish Burial. I mean, it's kind of obvious. You want to mill monsters. Like if you have like this and this, for example, you could mill like Defender and then summon Zaro, and then you got your combo there. Or if you have, let's say, 6 spell counters on the field but not Endymion, you can mill Endymion. There's your combo. If you got Magic Fusion and some people in the graveyard, you can mill this and then get your Dark Magicians. It's pretty universal how you can use it. Secrets is obvious. Soul of Knowledge, right? You search this and then draw 2 cards. This one is here because you will be using Fates. And Fates banishes spellbook cards from your graveyard. So you'll use this to retrieve one of them. Spellbook of the Master is here just so that you can copy. So a really good starter combo. So let's say that you open with Secrets, and let's say that you open with Secrets and Eternity. Because if you open these 2, that's a pretty good hand, especially turn 2. Because what you could do is use Secrets, right? Use Secrets. You can get, like, let's say Prophecy or some other card. So let's say that you have Zaro on your field, right? So you have Zaro, you summon another spellcaster or whatever. So then you use Secrets, and then you get Master, right? So you use Master to then copy Secrets that's in the graveyard, and then you search Knowledge, right? So now you have 2 spellbook spell cards in your graveyard. Then you use Knowledge to then draw 2 cards, which means that now your Fate has 3 cards that it can use, right? 3 spellbook spell cards that it can banish to non-target banish 1 card your opponent controls. And then after you banish those cards, you can use Eternity either that turn or the next turn to then retrieve one of them, right? Depending on, you know, what's in your hand. And so these two work, not these two, this one works really well, but these two work really well together, or even Spellbook of Fate plus Master. That's also really good, because then, even then, you can still go Secrets, Master to get Secrets, use Knowledge, and then therefore you now have a full-powered Fate in your hands, right? Next up is Magicalized Fusion. So this card is basically a poly, but for the graveyard, and that's really the only reason it's really used. It's used so that you can kind of still fuse stuff, right? Next is Spell Power Mastery. Spell Power Mastery. This is kind of obvious. You're running 4 Endymion cards, and since he is your main Wincon, you do want to get him in his other spell cards as fast as possible as you can. Now, speaking on Endymion cards, you could opt to remove 1 Defender and then add in 1 Crusader, because the Crusader of Endymion is a monster, right? And not only that, it's a level 4 monster. So if you were to open, for example, let's say that you open like Citadel, you open Endymion's Lab, Dark Renewal, and then you have Zaro and Spell Power Mastery, right? That's a pretty sucky hand. But what you could do in that case is activate Citadel, activate Spell Power Mastery, get Crusader, and then you summon Zaro, and then you got at least Calamity. So it did happen a few times where I wish I had Crusader. And since these two are your main search spells, it may benefit to add in a Crusader, just so that your 2 most, like, basically powerful search spells can also still give you a monster if you need one. So you know, something to keep in mind. Wonder Wand is there because of the Endymion Loop, which is basically you use his effect to summon himself, and then you get Wonder Wand back into your hand if it's in your graveyard. You equip it on 2 Endymion, and then these get spell counters, and then you send it to the graveyard, and then you draw 2 cards, and then you rinse and repeat. So you know, that's the Endymion Loop basically. Is that you just keep using these 2 together. But the other spell cards are good enough where even if you don't have Wonder Wand, you can still like use his you can still use his revival to great effect, regardless. Citadel is kind of obvious why you're using it. You're using it because you can obviously summon this guy. It does have some interaction and synergy, specifically with Exemplar. Just in case some of you don't know, when a card with spell counters is destroyed, Citadel gains those counters. So in Exemplar's case, let's say that she's sitting there with 10 spell counters, and let's say that you revive Endymion, right? And let's say that Citadel now has like 2 spell counters, right? And let's just say that you don't have enough spells to get the other 6, or sorry, the other 4 that you need. So you could discard one of those spells, and then pop Exemplar, and then those 10 will go into Citadel, giving you 12 spell counters, which means that you're guaranteed at least 2 revives. Just a FYI. And then the tower is here. So this one is more so here because if you were to open Spell Power Mastery, right? It's better if you search Lab than if you search Citadel first. And the reason is because they both have the same function, really, right? Outside of some interactions, they both have the same function. But the reason you run both, right, is because Endymion's Lab has a little clause that says you can only activate 1 Endymion's Lab per turn. So it's good to have at least 1 Citadel to potentially get your Indy loop early. Now, if you are basically almost at your loop, then you would search this to get it going. But sometimes it's better to get Grand Spellbook Tower, because each turn you can draw a card, right? Because here it says, once per turn, during your standby phase, if you have a spellcaster monster on your side of the field or in your graveyard, you can place one spellbook spell card from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck, except, this card, then draw one card. Now this is really good because, in case you don't notice, that is an effect that activates. So that means that Dark Magicians, which will draw you a card when you activate a spell card or effect, combine it with the Dark Magicians, and you draw 2 every standby phase, basically, right? So there's a lot of synergy with that. And then on top of that, it being able to recycle cards from your graveyard into your deck is not the worst, because obviously you can just research them, right? So like, let's say that you were to get the Indie Loop that turn later, right? You could just summon Endymion, grab secrets, and then just add the card that you shuffled earlier. So it's not that big of a deal. But you're mostly using this for the draw card, also because by it being a field spell, that means that let's say that you have, let's say, 2 labs on the field, right? Let's say that this is like turn 3, and you got 2 of these on the field. So, and you've got secrets. You can just get tower, activate tower, and then get your spell counters. Another thing too to note with this spellbook tower actually is the fact that it is also a spellbook spell card, which is important. You don't want to run other cards such as spellbook Starhold, because you're already running 3 continuous spells, so you might not want to run a 4th one, right? Like, a 4th copy of a continuous spell. And majority of the other spellbook spell cards are not good. So this is pretty much the only one you will probably want to use, but is, in my opinion, the one that you get the most mileage out of, in my opinion. Now, Endymion's Lab has, like I said, the same function as the Magical Citadel. Now, the interaction it has is with Exemplar as well, but as well as the Dark Magicians. So, Dark Magicians. So let's say that you have her on field. And let's say that she has 10 spell counters. Again, and let's say that this has no play. So, its other effect is once per turn, after damage calculation, if your spellcaster monster is destroyed by battle, you can remove 6 spell counters from your fields, and then special summon 1 level 7 or higher spellcaster monster from your hand or deck. So what you could do is, let's say that your opponent kills Exemplar. Well, since it says after damage calculation, that means that it activates before she is actually destroyed. So if she has 10 spell counters, you can remove 6 from that 10 to use the effect of Endymion's Lab to then summon, Endymion or Dark Magician. Now, the better interaction, really, kind of the to me the selling point almost, is when you couple it with this guy. So let's say that this has 6 spell counters, and let's say that Endymion isn't anywhere on the field, right? Or matter of fact, let's say that there's 5 spell counters on this, right? There's 5 spell counters on this card, and then you got this guy on the field. So let's say that your opponent goes and they activate I don't know, some spell card, and then now this has 6. So when they go to kill this, right? You can remove the 6 from this to summon Endymion, right? And then when this gets killed, you would then also float into Girl and Dark Magician, right? So you get 3 bodies from them trying to kill you, Dark Magician, which is pretty fun. And then there's Dark Renewal, last card in the main deck. So Dark Renewal is pretty good because it's your other interrupter, aside from Spellbook of Fate and Iris. Now, this one has when your opponent basically when your opponent summons a monster, target one of those monsters and one spellcaster monster you control, send both of them to the graveyard, then you can special summon one dark spellcaster monster from your deck or graveyard. So this is really good because, I mean, you can also use it to turbo out Dark Magician, Girl, or Endymion, depending on what's in your hand. The real kicker, though, is when you combine it with Dark Magician, funny enough, because what you could do, let's say that they summon Cyber Dragon, for example. So you can use this to then send both the Cyber Dragon and Dark Magician to the graveyard. And since Dark Magician is a dark spellcaster, you can then summon it right back. And so basically, Dark Renewal acts as a free removal for spellcaster decks that use dark monsters, which is, you know, a ton of them. And in this case, they're all dark, right? All of your main casters are dark, right? So you got, you know, your Dark Magician, Dark Magician Girl, Endymion, Dark Magicians, Master of Chaos. Well, these are all light, but you get my point. So that is the reason that I use Dark Renewal, because even though it is a trap, right, it being free removal is pretty good. Now next up is now the extra deck. So I've already talked about Dark Magicians. What about Iris? So this card, as a monster, meaning that, like, you know, as one that's on the field, it can equip itself to a monster your opponent controls. Well, no, opponent, but any monster. It can target one monster on the field, and then that monster gains 1,000 attack and defense. However, if it's a monster, you will then take control of it. But there is a caveat: you cannot activate its effects. So that is something to be aware of. Now, the reason I have this at 3, right? So the reason it's at 3 is because it's a really good card to put onto Zaro, because, you know, make him beefier to beat over stuff. Now, that was before I realized that Varam is probably the better option for that. But this is really good for polymerization, funny enough, because, and also for Magic Light Fusion, because you don't care if you banish Zaro from the graveyard, right? And in Poly, obviously that's also pretty good. And so since this effect is a quick effect, it makes it a really good interrupter as well. So if you have, like, let's say Iris, some other dark spellcaster, let's say you have like Souls, right? So your end board is a set Dark Renewal, Iris, and Souls. That's a pretty good board, because then you yoink a monster, you can then send to the graveyard another one, and then summon out just a bigger dark spellcaster. See what I mean? So to be fair, you don't need Souls. It can be Iris and, like, let's say, you know, Defender, right? Because then you'll send Defender, and then you'll summon back, not summon back, but you'll summon either Indy or, you know, one of those cards. And now we're off to Master of Chaos, the Tertiary win condition. So he's not exactly too hard to summon. Well, it's a bit hard for me to say, because in most cases where I could summon this, the opponent surrenders prematurely. And by prematurely, I mean that they had no reason to surrender. Well, at least from my point of view, they just kind of just surrendered, like, okay, I quit. But this card is really good. So what it does is it will basically act as a monster reborn for you for any light or dark monster in your graveyard, which majority of your extra deck, and obviously majority of the good targets you want to summon, well, not Hercules Earth, but you're going to want them to be light and dark, right? And so you're supposed to summon it. You can tribute, and this is the reason this is the real reason you'll run this card, because you can tribute one light and one dark to basically banish your opponent's monsters, all of them. So some good targets, for example, could be like a Defender, because Defender's light, right? Because you can summon Endymion, right? But you can also do things like Artemis, if you don't have her on the like, you know, if you didn't use her yet, you could, like, normal summon Exemplar into this for a light monster. Or you really, better yet, you could summon Endymion, right? get Monster Reborn from your graveyard, activate it, get a light monster from somewhere, and then use his effect to then banish all your opponent's monsters, and then resummon Endymion, and then get reborn again, do your shenanigans. Now Supreme Arcanine Magician is here, mainly because at first I got it here because it was a little bit bigger beat stick, and it can sometimes be hard to summon the Arcanine Magician, because the only way to do so is to have both Zaro and the Amoras. So the go-to was to summon Calamity and then use Polymerization or this to then summon Supreme. Now Supreme has lost a bit of favor. It does draw a card, so I still keep it. But ever since I added Varam to the deck, I've been using this a lot less, because this plus this, in my opinion, is a little bit stronger than just this. But there is some synergy because it is a spell counter card. So like if your opponent was to kill it, you can obviously still use this. And on top of that, unlike Zaro, if you were to summon this later, right? If you were to summon this later, it can still use its effects. The thing with Zaro is that if you were to summon it again later, it does not equip a card to itself automatically. It does it when synchro summon, but it doesn't do it when special summoned, and that's important. And that's important to note. So on a rebound kind of a thing, this is better on the rebound. So like, let's say that you summon Zaro, and let's say that Zaro and Varam is not a good board, right? Let's say that you see your board, you see your opponent's board, and you're like, okay, I need to have something that will give me a little bit of oomph, like, you know, over time. Well, then you can get this, right? Because then if you summon this later, you can still use its effects to either pop a card or draw a card. Arcanine Magician, I already said what this does. This one just pops your opponent's field because it's not a once per turn. Every is the one that acts like a DPE. This one uses 3 spells. Now this card right here, which is the Daybreaker. So, when you use this deck, you're going to want to summon these, right? Summon these guys. Now, once you finish going into 2 of these, you will then end with Daybreaker. Now, how do you do that? So this is mostly information for the Endymion loop, because the one way to get Endymion in your graveyard constantly is to link. So what you would do is, let's say you have Endymion in your graveyard. Let's say that you have, you know, Defender on your field, and let's just say that you have 1,000,000 spell counters on your Citadel. So you would take Endymion, you will activate, you know, his effect to summon himself. You will, you know, get any spell. You will use the spell. And then you will link away for Crowley. Crowley uses effect to get more spells, and you summon Endymion back. You know, use some spells, and then you go into the next one, put him to the graveyard, and then summon him right back, and then, you know, get a spell back, do some stuff, and then you link him and him to get Daybreaker, right? Now why? You'll see in a minute. So you do that, right? He's in the graveyard. So then you use Endymion one last time, summon him to a zone that this card points to, retrieve a spell, and this is pretty good because this does allow you to also chain block. So what you would do is that you would activate Endymion Chainlink 1, and he has an effect where if a spellcaster monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, place 1 spell counter on this card. So you activate this Chainlink 2, and therefore you will chain block Endymion, which is pretty good. And then at this point, Daybreaker will have 2 spell counters because it gains 1 on summon. So then you can remove 2 spell counters to then trigger one card, trigger any one card, and then pop it. You use Endymion's effect to, you know, discard a card and pop it. So basically, together, it's a good ender. Basically, it's a good finish. It's a good, like, cleanup, basically. And that is the deck, basically. there isn't really much to really show of this deck, because it's kind of straightforward. It's not like Pendulum Endymion, where there's like a mini routes. There are a couple of routes here, but it's not anything like extraordinary. Not really anything that I haven't said. It's not anything I haven't said already. The rest of it is really just having an awareness of your opponent, what they might and might not have, and what deck they're playing. So, like, you know, if they're facing, like, for example, if you're fighting Sacred Beast, right? Raviel has 4k attack. So you know that going to Zaro and then equipping Iris is not going to work, because he will have the 3900 attack, and Raviel can just beat over that. So if you pick something like Varam, it's a little different, because now they have less answers to it, right? Because their field spell protects them from being targeted, but this doesn't target, right? So it's things like that where, like, you just kind of have to understand what you're up against, basically, and then just go according to that. So yeah, that'll be it.